I ended up having PCOS by the time I was like 19. You know, even while I was thinking that I was eating healthfully, I was doing a lot of fast food and Taco Bell and pizza and all these things, you know. But it was vegetarian, so, you know, I thought I was doing great. I would bleed for like 9 months straight. I went to the doctor and they tested everything and they said, good news, everything's perfect. There's nothing wrong with you. And I was just like, okay, that's just great to hear because I feel like I'm dying.
I had severe abdominal pain every single day. I pretty much didn't even have the urge to have a bowel movement anymore. It was just gripping, cramping pain.
When lymphatic waste, which is our body's main sewage system, gets clogged up, then cells start to become damaged. It's a million different symptoms based off of those damaged cells.
If you want to remodel your house, right, you have to tear down first, and you make a big mess, and things get kicked up and stirred up in the air and everything. And once you clear all of that out, then you can start rebuilding and have this beautiful finished product.
I think that, like, in order to have a spiritual connection, you need to be clear in your body.
Hello and welcome to Your Health Habit. Today I'm super excited to be talking to the one who got me started on my high fruit, high raw healing journey, the beautiful Rena and Thecla. So I believe I reached out to you after the fourth of my 5 consecutive pregnancy losses. And at the time I was just physically and emotionally shattered from the trauma. I had several medically complicated fetal demises, and then I also had a ruptured ectopic pregnancy and surgery for that. At the time, I was dealing with a 24 out of 27 score for severe depression. I had massive brain fog, chronic fatigue. My food wasn't digesting. I had severe abdominal pain every single day. I pretty much didn't even have the urge to have a bowel movement anymore. It was just gripping, cramping pains that would just come down on me. And then I also was struggling with chronic neutropenia, so immune compromised, very low white blood cell count. And also I was Sjogren's positive and had positive anti-nuclear antibodies. So a whole slew of things going on. But I actually reached out to you simply because I was seeing your posts on helping women with fertility issues. And so I was really desperate to just do anything I possibly could to increase our chances of a successful pregnancy. And I actually just reaped this bounty of systemic healing as a bonus from the lifestyle I was inspired to embark on by you. So before I talk about kind of my healing, you have a really amazing story. And so I'm just going to ask if you could walk us through like your previous lifestyle and the demise of your health as a young woman.
So I was raised vegetarian and, you know, so vegetarian, but with like a lot of like processed veggie meats and like, you know, all of that kind of thing. And so I always thought that I was living, you know, healthfully until like, you know, I started noticing issues with my health quite early on, actually. Yeah. So at age 12, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. We got our Wi-Fi, actually. Very interesting. That's it. Like 2 weeks later, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. So I took medication for years, I think from the time I was 11 until, I don't know, maybe 15 or 16, when I started also taking a lot of hormone replacement therapy. Because my ovaries pretty much started quitting producing like progesterone and different estrogen, you know, estradiol started getting really, and pretty much ended all the way until it was probably like when I was 19 or 20. And that's pretty much when my body quit making progesterone completely. So by the time I was, 21, about the time we got married, my body quit producing those certain hormones. And, you know, even while I was thinking that I was eating healthfully, I was doing a lot of fast food and Taco Bell and pizza and all these things, you know, but it was vegetarian. So, you know, I thought I was doing great. And, so it kind of just, you know, as the years went by, I ended up having PCOS by the time I was like 19. And then it just kind of everything, I just started feeling worse all the time. Like, you know, within a year or two, I had a lot of like blood sugar issues. I even passed out in class once. And then, you know, I got married when I was 21. And I really didn't feel good at that point. Like I had a lot of, issues leading up to that, that I was not feeling good. I would have horrible, painful cycles. That I would have cysts, and I had, all these blood sugar issues and everything. But then, as I was going to get married, I thought, well, I have to be on birth control because we weren't ready to, have a family yet. And I knew better than to start with birth control, but I thought, well, we wanted to wait some years before having, kids. And so we thought, well, everyone else does it, it's probably fine. And I knew, like, I had feeling, I just knew this was not a good decision. But anyway, that's what I did. And so yeah, literally about the time that we got married, I just was kind of in a really bad place. My legs, I started noticing different things. Like I couldn't sleep well at night. My legs started cramping like a lot. And then my heart would be racing at nighttime. And I was just thinking like, what is this? And so then I would take more medicine and stuff to calm things down. And, it just got to a place where I was taking more medicine and then I was feeling worse. So then more medicine, feeling worse. And it was just kind of this like back and forth until all of a sudden I just felt really bad. Yeah. What I was doing was like not working. And the more I was doing it, the worse it was getting. And so it kind of just got to the place that, because I had gotten an IUD, which was my first birth control. And I felt terrible with that. I mean, like I had horrible pain that was just unbelievable pain, like awful. But I thought, well, they said that, if I just hang on a year or so, it'll just go away. That just got worse. So about the time I got that taken out, I just felt immediately better getting that out. And then I went on to birth control pills because again, a different doctor, she's like, well, if you're not ready for kids, then you need to be on birth control and everything. And so then I started with that. And then everything just kind of kept getting worse and getting worse and getting worse. And it was getting to the place where I was ending up with horrible fatigue. I could sleep like 13 or 14 hours a night and I felt like I hadn't slept all night. I was just so exhausted. I felt dizzy kind of, I was a little disoriented and like, I had horrible painful cycles that were super irregular. And I would bleed so much that I was like about passing out from that. And so it all kind of just got worse and worse until one day, I had slept like 14 hours that night. I was exhausted, went to work, came back, and from that night on, I couldn't sleep, like no sleep. And during the night, I just felt completely buzzed up, it was like my heart was racing. I was shaking on the inside. I just felt absolutely terrible. And then it kind of just all went downhill from there. Within a few weeks, I had like pre-diabetes, these like major glucose related issues. And, it was just terrible. It was really terrible. And then I would bleed for like 9 months straight. And, my iron levels were so low that I just felt really bad, but I couldn't take iron because it made my whole body freak out. So I just ended up with it was like this compiling issues of problems that were just getting worse and worse and worse. So finally, it took me a lot of time. I went to the doctor and they tested everything and they said, good news, everything's perfect. There's nothing wrong with you. And I was just like, okay, that's just great to hear because I feel like I'm dying and there's nothing wrong with me.
That is such a common experience.
It is a common experience. And so so at that point, I just kind of like knew that if I was going to have any kind of a life, that I needed to figure this out myself. So this put me on like this path of trying to figure out how to heal. And the most frustrating thing is trying to figure out how to heal when you're in such a bad place. I'm sure you can relate to that with, being in such a low state. I thought it's this or I'm just not going to make it really. And so it got to the place where I was so bad off. My blood pressure was pretty much a consistent like 69 over 59. And I was exhausted. I was not sleeping. I felt terrible. I had tremors like an old person. I would be shaking and it was just awful. My hair was going gray and it was falling out. And so, so I just started digging in. I started doing a lot of different things. And I just found that the more that I turned towards like whole natural foods in like in their more natural state, kind of the better I felt. But that also took a lot of work because, then people would say like, do all raw. So I would start eating a lot of raw cakes, right? And I felt terrible eating a lot of raw cakes, which is just a bunch of heavy nuts and seeds. And so then I thought, no, what am I going to do? But then I started realizing, more, and then I thought, well, maybe lighter things, but you can't just live off of salad, right? So this was like a big
Right.
process of trying to figure out, like, what do you eat? What do you not eat? Um,
Right.
yeah, and so I really kind of just figured out, how to find a good balance between like fruit and vegetables and doing a lot of that raw. I'd say most things leveled out, and I was able to get pregnant. I had 2 healthy pregnancies. And it's very interesting because actually in the beginning of all of this, I had done some saliva tests because, right, the blood test showed I was of perfect health.
Yeah.
So I did some saliva tests, and I found out actually that I was postmenopausal at that point in the beginning.
Crazy.
Yeah, so my body quit producing progesterone. I had sky high levels of estrogen. I had like super high levels of testosterone. It was like 3 times higher than it should have been. My cortisol was tanked, which is actually quite dangerous because, when you get into a state of stress, your cortisol rises.
Right.
But then when it starts crashing and not being able to hold the cortisol at a good, level, then you get problems. And that's the reason why my blood pressure was so dangerously low. And so it just took a lot of time. I got some help, with people that specialize in adrenal healing and stuff. And that took me to a certain point of healing. But really, it didn't take me past that because there wasn't much focus on food or anything like that. So it was just supplementing. And that got me out of a really bad spot, but it really didn't heal me. So it kind of took me back to the basics. Yeah. Of like, how were we created? How does it all work? What do we have for medicine? We are part of nature, and nature has a certain way of operating. And when we give our bodies the opportunity to heal, they will. And so it just, it really put me on this long course of figuring out and trying a lot of different things, researching so many different things. I've taken courses, I've read books, I've talked to both medical and natural healing professionals and all kinds of different things to really formulate these ideas of what I have learned and how they work.
And that's pretty crazy that, usually you go to the doctor, they run a standard lab panel, and you could have all these issues and never even find out about them, particularly if you don't have a doctor who thinks outside the box, or you go to someone that's more naturopathic or something, that runs non-standard tests, and you just be running around and around and never getting anywhere. I know that you teach an entire course helping women to learn how to balance their hormones. I believe it's called Living Flow. So in all of the things that you've collected and learned over the years and through your own healing journey, what would you pick out as the most essential components of a healing lifestyle?
Well, if we're talking about, women and their hormones, which really encompasses everything, I would say, almost with whatever health issues might arise, everything has to do with endocrine function, and, cellular function and the nervous system. It just affects everything. Women are designed to, not be in a high stress environment. We need to have peace around us. That's an important factor. We need to eat whole foods in a natural state as we can. Those are also very important factors. We just need to do all these things that take us back to kind of our roots. We've gotten to be, in a world right now where everything's so synthetic and so fake, so processed and so, chemicaled up and everything. And it's all these things just disrupt our hormones and completely cause, wreak a ton of havoc. And so it's a matter of kind of going back to those natural things and understanding how to use food and how to use herbs and how to regulate your nervous system, how to get, make sure you get enough rest, and all these different things combine in order to kind of heal the system as a whole. With healing, it's definitely not a, take a pill kind of thing. It's a whole round approach. Making sure that all these different systems are functioning well, making sure the body is given what it needs. Make sure that your emotional status, your surroundings are good, making sure you're connecting with nature, eliminating a lot of these plastics and a lot of these different things, that lead towards endocrine disrupting problems. So it's definitely a whole package. It's a whole package deal.
So you mentioned that part of your healing journey involved raw foods. Something that can be really important as we're embarking on the journey is to cleanse our system. I started with a juice fast, and I juice fasted for several days. I don't remember if it was up to a week. And And then something that you had emphasized was to go fruit heavy. And I had done a lot of cleansing programs in the past that were more vegetable heavy. And that works really well for a lot of people. For me, that never worked very well at all. And I've always had a problem with being underweight rather than overweight. And my energy being a huge factor with me struggling with chronic fatigue. That never worked very well. So when I went through the juicing, which kind of, just detoxed and cleaned my system, then I started with just fruit only, and then 100% raw vegan, adding in more vegetables, and then slowly introducing small portions of very simple, cooked foods like quinoa. The fruit, it's really great for energy. I find, and just very hydrating. It's really helps for the system to not have to work too hard at digestion. I actually was on a raw vegan or high raw vegan diet for 6 months straight. And I did notice that whenever I would go to a family event or something like that, and I would eat a bunch of cooked food, probably more than 40%, of my intake for the day, I would immediately start feeling heavy. I would start feeling the fatigue, and things like that kind of coming back. The part that everybody is going to be wondering about is the results, right? The first thing that I noticed was energy. Just a massive change in energy. I can feel the life in the food. Just hitting my cells with the juices, especially with the high fruit. So I just had a massive increase in energy from the chronic fatigue that I had been dealing with. My brain fog was gone. My mind was clear. My abdominal pain completely disappeared. All of the cramping when I had to go to the bathroom, no more gas, no more bloating. And a bonus I love is there's zero poo smell. Once you start eating that clean and live, it's just a massive change. Something that I wasn't expecting to experience was the balancing out of my weight. Cause like I said, I had always been underweight and I would lose weight really fast and it would take forever to put it back on. Now you would think that with eating a lot of raw food, if anything, it would be harder to gain weight. But I found that the body just adjusts to become more efficient at absorbing and utilizing the nutrients. And so my weight actually balanced out to where if I went through a period where I couldn't eat as much and lost a little weight, it would bounce back way faster and just overall was way more stable. My autoantibodies disappeared from my blood. The Sjogren's did stay, but the symptoms were gone. Yeah. So my white count, I was getting followed by a rheumatologist, and a hematologist at the time because I had such an issue with chronic, neutropenia. And so I was going back for labs every single month on the high fruit, high raw vegan diet. I had about 1,000-point increase in my white count every month until it stabilized well within the normal area. My depression also, just 1 month in, I went from the 24 out of 27 to a 5. So you don't always think about kind of the impact of diet lifestyle on mental health, but it is massive. Even in the aftermath of trauma and the extreme loss that I was dealing with, severe depression versus a 5 of situational depression, which you would expect in the grieving process, and the loss of the babies. So, just to be able to experience joy, to be able to, kind of feel the sadness, but to be able to feel okay, I'm not dying every moment of every day from, the aftermath of the loss is huge. So I wanted to kind of talk about why this works. Electricity is a huge part of why this works. Our organism, our human body is electric, every cell, every organ, is depending on electricity to communicate, to function. And so I like to think about this like high vibe. Everybody is always like, high vibe. It's like more than a hippie slogan though. It's like there's real science of like bioelectricity that you can actually measure the electricity in foods. And you are consuming that energy when you consume things that are alive versus things that are dead. Our body actually has this ideal electric charge that it functions at. I learned this actually function at in a state of perfect health. So, and that charge actually goes down when we're in a state of unhealth. We can actually increase our charge by specifically eating raw fruits and vegetables, organic raw fruits and vegetables. And they have this like electrophotography that they can actually measure the charge of the different foods. And of course, meat like has a bioelectric charge of 0 because it's dead. And it's really a source of stored energy in the form of calories, right? And it has stored minerals and things like that, but 0 electric charge, 0 live enzymes, which is another big part of the lifestyle is the live enzyme. So the issue with too much cooked food, I think, really is that basically you're killing it. And you're canceling your enzymes, you're canceling your bioelectric energy. Of course, there's definitely a lot of value in healthy cooked foods, but when it's taking over everything that you're consuming, you're missing out on all of this energy, all of these enzymes, and then the thermolabile vitamins as well, like C, B1, B5, you're really diminishing or canceling out. And I know like in Chinese medicine, there's this thing about heat and cold. And so they would say eating too much raw food would be a problem because it's too cold. But the problem with too much cooked food then is it's too dead. The exciting thing as well about the electric food is they've actually done some experiments that I'm going to link as well in the description of this video. But they've done some experiments that are really fascinating where they inject animals with cancer cells. And if they can control and increase their bioelectric charge, hold the bioelectric charge high, that the cancer actually doesn't develop even in the animals that have the cells like implanted in them. So they have a predisposition and even can cause tumors that are already there to shrink and go away. So like this electricity is huge, together with the full spectrum of nutrients. Something I did want to talk to you about that we had talked about when I first connected with you is healing crises, because a lot of people that I talk to, they'll be like, oh, I tried to go vegetarian, I tried to go vegan, or I tried to go raw, or whatever it might be in the process of their journey. And like, I felt terrible, all my food was just coming right through, or like all of these different things that people experience. So, a big thing that I kind of wanted to just touch on is kind of the process of, cleansing and healing crisis that can happen, because I know a lot of people are going to be really interested, who have been trying a lot of different things to heal and embarking on it. It can be very discouraging if you don't know what to expect. And one thing that like, I kind of like to frame it in this example of like, if you want to remodel your house, right? You have to tear down first and you make a big mess and things get kicked up and stirred up in the air and everything. And once you clear all of that out, then you can start rebuilding and have this beautiful finished product. But like, if you are trying to heal your body, if you're trying to renovate your body, basically, you have to go through the same cleansing process. And a lot of people are really not expecting it. So, could you kind of touch on, because I know you had talked to me a little bit about your experience cleansing and some of the things that you can encounter in that process.
Yeah, for sure. So it is very interesting because, with the whole healing crisis scenario. So, a lot of people see, for example, like kids, for instance, that are outside in the cool air and they're playing and all of a sudden their nose starts running, right? Like, what is that? That's the body kind of initiating a little bit of a detox to eliminate mucus. And it's very interesting because, people are so interested in stopping the sickness all the time, right? Like, oh, someone has a fever, we got to stop the fever. And someone's got, a little bit of an infection, we got to stop it right away, with all the antibiotics and all this stuff. But these things are the body's method of healing. And we often kind of cut that short with all of these not so natural remedies, and it's kind of our body's way of clearing out and keeping it clean, right? Because when lymphatic waste, which is our body's main sewage system, gets clogged up, then cells start to become damaged. It's basically like, think of like a pool filled with acid, right? And you jump in that and it's going to burn. And all of our cells, we forget that we are made of cells. Everything is in our body is made of cells. And if that fluid surrounding those cells are hot and acidic because everything's trapped and not flowing, then those cells are going to get damaged. And then who knows what's going to happen? You can get a million different symptoms based off of those damaged cells. And so yeah, definitely kind of cleaning that out is really important. Not everyone for raw food fasting or fruit fasting, because if your adrenals and your nervous system are too weak to be able to deal with that, you can shut down your whole body if it's not prepared for that. So you've got to build up and get your body into a good enough place to be able to do fruit fasting, because that cleans out the system. And while the system's cleaning out, you might dump a little bit of minerals and different things in the process. So you've got to be strong enough to be able to do that. So when diving in, it's very interesting because, a lot of people need it really, right? Because a lot of people have been living on pizza and fast food, and their body really needs some hydration and some, electrolytes and some different, all these different minerals and everything to get everything flowing. And that's super important. And so those symptoms can lead on to, cold symptoms. And the typical detox symptoms are, headache and runny nose and diarrhea, or a bunch of these different kind of things, fever, chills. All those are symptoms of the body grabbing waste and flushing it out. So you could get a lot of those symptoms. But the thing that is important to know, I'm thinking for other people watching, it's important to know kind of where you're at. If your body is strong enough to start this process, or if it's not built up enough to start that process. So that's where kind of looking into that is important. And one thing that, we'll find, in the raw food and especially the fruit community, is that most people say just dig deeper, go on like water fast and do all these things, but that can be dangerous for people who are not strong enough for that. So, so it's a matter of kind of, knowing how, if you're strong enough for that, if you're feeling quite well, your body's pretty strong, but you're dealing with some health issues, then that's a good time to go on fruit fasting and do some of these things to clean out the terrain. But if, the adrenals are very weak and the body is depleted and different things like that, that's not a good time to go on a fruit fast. So kind of just recognizing both of those and figuring out which direction to go is important.
Yeah. Okay, then that's such a great point that you brought up, knowing where you are and if you're really, really weak. So if someone is at that stage where it isn't best to start with fruit fasting or juice fasting or something like that, where would you recommend that they start?
Yeah. So this is an interesting perspective because after I had my second child, it's very interesting because I ended up being very depleted myself. And I had also done tons of just fruit, and I had like no sleep that year of we had a lot of issues with our last child. So no sleep, completely exhausted. So I basically learned that, at that point, all fruit is not the thing to do because, it all has to do with minerals as well, right? So minerals that are extremely essential are sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. And if you do not have enough taurine, which gets depleted during pregnancy, lack of sleep, stress, and breastfeeding, then you're not going to retain those minerals, those 4 minerals. Once those minerals get out, then everything crashes. The nervous system, the adrenals, the liver function, bile production, gallbladder, and digestion all go right down the drain until the taurine gets built up and the minerals start to reabsorb into the cells. And so what I have found, and this is not a plant-based perspective, so this is going to be very interesting, but what I have found is that egg yolks and grass-fed, raw butter and raw goat's milk is the best at boosting taurine. And it's very interesting because it's I've had a lot of people say, what? This is not the fruit thing. But it's important to remember that fruit fasting is for detoxing, and for rebuilding, you need to work on these other things because you'll never get taurine boosted by eating just fruit. So those are very interesting. So as I have also worked on that, it's just boosted very quickly. And then adding in fruit is very helpful because you need those potassium. You need the potassium and you need the sodium and you need the calcium and you need the magnesium and you need all those different elements. But if you're just sticking with fruit in that very depleted state, it's just not going to work.
So what I'm hearing then is when we're in a really advanced state of depletion, instead of starting with cleansing, we have to start with building.
Okay.
Building, that's right. And root vegetables are also very important. So at that point, if you're completely depleted, root vegetables like sweet potatoes, what's it called in English? Rutabaga, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
Rutabaga. Turnips. I'm trying to think what this is all called in English. Sorry. Turnips, rutabaga, sweet potatoes. A lot of those root vegetables. Those combined with a healthy fat and salt is what the adrenals and the cells want. So yeah, rebuilding is one scenario and detoxing is another scenario. So you've got to kind of like figure out which field you're in and kind of work with that. Once you get built up to a good enough place, you can do detoxing with fruit and different things like that. But you can't do detoxing if you're in a completely empty state, basically. So, and a lot of people are, a lot of people are toxic, depleted, and their lymphatic systems are clogged and their adrenals are shot, and they do need detoxing. But yeah, the rebuilding has to come first sometimes, but not for everyone. There's a lot of people who are, they're in a good enough place, but they've been living on all the fast food and all the stuff. And what their bodies just need is, a lot of hydration and a lot of simple fruit and alkalinity. So, so it's very interesting.
Yeah, acidity and alkalinity is another huge part of this whole picture as well, because consuming a lot of acidifying foods and beverages, caffeine, coffee, very acidifying, and things like that. Acid is actually the environment that promotes inflammation. And inflammation is at the root of, so much disease.
Yeah, so hydration is an electrical experience, right? And it's a dance between these minerals. So that's why, so it's very important to have these minerals. And part of the problem is, in society today, is that we're getting loads of salt, loads of the wrong kind of salt. We're getting processed salt, which is just sodium chloride. When you have salt, you need it in its full perspective, right? With all the other, 60 plus minerals, maybe it's 80 minerals. You need it in its full spectrum. And then it's an alkaline element. But when you have salt that's just, processed and sodium chloride, then you end up having a very acidic, very toxic substance. And most everyone eats that, everything that everyone's eating, this store-bought breads and all this fast food and all this, seed oils are another thing, all this processed stuff, and they're getting all of these things that they're basically loaded up on sodium. So going from that to, a fruit thing, which is going to help cleanse all of this stuff out and bring a little bit of balance to the body is very important.
That is something that I think probably most people wouldn't know or think about at all. Something so basic like salt, sodium chloride, your table salt. I love to use Himalayan pink salt because it has a lot of those other minerals in it, and it tastes delicious. And also, while we're talking about this whole journey of healing and restoration and rebuilding and things like that, we don't want anyone to get the idea of too diet heavy. Like, this is not about a diet, it's about a whole lifestyle. So while the diet elements are extremely important, stress itself kills. I do want to say that stress and genetic predisposition are significant factors in, specifically the development of autoimmune disease, but a whole host of other disease processes as well. And with autoimmune, standard medical practice actually tells us autoimmune disease is not curable. You can manage it, and sometimes people go into remission, but they'll say it's not curable. But we also have this whole host of environmental factors now these days to contend with. But with all of that, there's still a huge community of us out here who are either healed or healing, and so for people watching, what if that could could be you. But let's not think that this is just only about diet. You know, the entire lifestyle, and I know you talk about this in your living flow as well, creating a space of peace. And I think as women especially, we're expected to push and push and push, and a lot of times we have to push and push. And you know, I had my daughter December. Finally, we had a daughter, and I also found myself in the aftermath very depleted, very tired. You know, and I had actually gone off of my high raw lifestyle, which I was doing better than I had ever done before in my life. My digestion, my absorption, my energy, my skin was so clear, everything like that. And actually, while I was pregnant, I was just so hungry. I was so hungry, and I was like, I need something, I need a little bit more, you know. But with that, then, you know, I ended up losing some of the benefits that I had before, and postpartum, I started having a lot of issues again, and joint pain, and all kinds of things like that. And so I'm like, I'm going back towards what was working before, what had me so healthy and vibrant again, which just adding juice to what I was already doing has been amazing for that. Adding daily juicing, and then kind of, it's hard when you're a mom and you're busy and you're tired and you can't put as much into everything that you're doing as far as self-care and preparation and things like that. But just even incrementally adding some of these elements into your life, or back into your life, in my case, can make an amazing, massive difference. And I can feel that electric energy. And it hits so fast too, really. Like with a lot of natural things, it is a slower process than if you were just throw medications at it that mask symptoms, but then they create other symptoms. But, you know, I find that juice and live raw foods, I feel it right away.
And especially after having been like focused, because I think I ate raw for 3.5 years. And
Wow.
so it was very interesting. Yeah. It has been very interesting now that I've learned to balance my minerals with the taurine. Now I actually am feeling as good on more cooked food as I was feeling on the fruit, which is very interesting. But even with that, I will never go back to eating 3 fully cooked meals a day, because I just love what the raw food can provide that the cooked food cannot. So it's definitely important to, you know, even once health is there, not to cut out the raw food, because you need that raw food, like you were talking about with the, you know, the electricity, and all those different things. So yeah, it's kind of like finding this whole balance, which is very, very interesting. Yeah.
I mean, health literally is a perfect state of balance, homeostasis. Everything in our body, everything in our entire environment is about balance. And that's what I've always tried to strive for, you know, in everything, physically, mentally, spiritually. It's all about balance. So,
Definitely. Yeah. You know, talking about like spiritually, it's a little interesting. Looking into like, you know, a lot of these people who practice, let's say like the New Age, and are like deep into like New Age meditation and all this other stuff. They're deep into the natural world, right? Of like grounding and eating raw and herbs, and maybe they take it a bit far in certain ways. But it's very interesting that like in order to have a spiritual connection, you need to be clear in your body. And you can't like fill it full of processed and chemicals and all this junk stuff and think that we're going to have any kind of like a clear, you know, mental, you know, spiritual perspective, if we can't even operate, if our blood can't even flow, and if our system's clogged up and not even working right. Very interesting that for the New Age community, they're all into. And then in the Christian community, you know, we're loading junk food and then wondering why we're not having much of like a spiritual connection. And I think that is a big factor. I think it's definitely a big factor in, you know, our relationship with God. So that's very interesting.
100%. You know, the nervous system is what connects us to the spiritual. And I hear a lot of people in the raw food community talking about this like massive heightening and tuning of this spiritual awareness and connection. And And so for sure, absolutely. If your mind is fogged up and unclear, you're not going to have the same level of experience that you could have otherwise. And to experience peace. What do you think you would like to leave viewers with, kind of as a parting thought, just kind of tying it all together?
Yeah, so yeah, when it comes to the body, you know, and hormones, and I've talked to so many different people and I've coached quite a few different people, and I always find it interesting that the women that are really struggling with their health are the ones with frazzled nervous systems, have eaten lots of processed foods and different things like that. And it's very important to go back to the basics and know that healing is possible. Like, do not just accept some sort of a diagnosis that you'll never be able to have babies, your hormones will always be a mess, you're going to have cysts, and that's just how it is. Like, don't accept that. There's something causing that problem, and there's something that can fix that problem. It might take a lifestyle change. It might take some dedication on your part and, you know, whoever's around you. And it can be hard. It can be hard to do something different than what everyone else is doing. Food and it's weird. People think that's weird. But at the same time, if people really care about you and your health, then they're going to be supportive in what's best for you. So, just don't make it a huge deal, but don't be scared to stand out and to do what you need to do. And, there's all these things in nature, things in nature to heal our bodies. And it's a matter of figuring out how to put it together and know what you need and to read your body's signals. And that's one thing that I really kind of emphasize in my Living Flow, is that the body is speaking a language. Every time we have a symptom, it's telling us something. And we need to understand what it is that it's telling us. It's not just a random symptom like, you have, ovarian cysts, but that has nothing to do with the rest of your body, right? Like, it doesn't have anything to do with what you eat. That's not true. That's not true with what we're told. And so different things, you can do different things in order to heal those problems. So kind of understanding the big picture, and kind of what I paint in Living Flow is I kind of go through all of the different aspects and different sides of how the hormones work, how the body as a whole works, and how you can read your symptoms and figure out what you need based off of your symptoms, and then put that together in one package. So it's not like one diet and one thing. It's figuring out so you can be your body's, I guess you can figure out yourself in a sense and figure out what you need in order to get your body to a good place. So, so it's very interesting and very exciting. And healing is definitely possible. So I would definitely not take no for an answer.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Yeah. And healing is a journey, and it's an individual journey. So it's finding your own balance. Thecla, what exciting thing can we look forward to from you in the coming days?
Yeah, I just finished my Living Flow and that course, and that took me forever to put together because I have, all of my 10 plus years of information and everything I have put in there, and I haven't wanted it to be overwhelming because I have the tendency to be overwhelming with all of the details. And so I've redone my course 3 times in order to make it compact, simple, but informative and easy to follow. So, so it took me a while. I finally got that finished. And now I've also opened up, the opportunity to have a Living Flow community. So I'm just just barely getting rolling with that. And, so that's very exciting. So it's basically, we're going to meet once a month. And people ask questions. We talk about different things. We share recipes. I give tips and, different things like that with, with this healing journey and women in different places that they're at, in this process. So that's pretty much what I have, for right now. And it's very exciting. I had been doing coaching for the last few years. But now we've started homeschooling and we've got a lot, our garden and everything. So thought we need to do this in a different way and to make it all work. So so it's very exciting to be able to help other people and work with them and bring life. And it's so exciting talking to someone like you, who has had such a good experience with changing your life and changing your diet and seeing the difference that it makes.
Thank you so much for joining us today, for having this conversation. It's been amazing. I want to encourage and invite everybody to check out Ross and Tisla to check out Vegan Iron Kitchen. And the next thing that we're going to be working on, hopefully, is getting out a recipe ebook or beverages. So I've been putting together a lot of my juicing recipes and some smoothie recipes, and things that are just really great for busy, tired moms, but for everybody, and some cleansing juices as well, things that are really targeted for liver and cancer and things like that. So be looking out for our recipe ebook, beverage recipe ebook coming up soon. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, share this with a friend, and remember, health is not an accident or a stroke of luck. Physical, emotional, and spiritual health is your most important habit.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, Discovering How We Healed. I wanted to add a little bonus on here because we talked about taurine from a non-plant-based perspective. So for those of you who are interested in keeping 100% plant-based, fortunately, there's a growing body of research on seaweed as a source of taurine. Specifically, red algae has a very high concentration of taurine. Perhaps that's why shellfish has the highest concentration in the animal kingdom. So you can get this from nori, such as what you use in sushi. Rice and keem is something that I've been craving a lot since I had my daughter, and perhaps that's why. You might be thinking, I can't eat enough seaweed to get the amount of taurine that I need if I am depleted. Supplementing is not always ideal, but this is a very clean source, no fillers, no additives, sourced from Japan, and it's purity tested. You just take a scoop of this and mix it with your water or another beverage of choice, and get a great boost of taurine from a plant-based source right there. I just started taking this a few days ago, so I'll let you know how it goes. Our bodies actually produce the taurine that we need from protein sources in our diet. But as we discussed, pregnancy, breastfeeding, and high stress can deplete our taurine. So we may need to turn to other sources of taurine in cases of extreme depletion. Let me know in the comments what other topics you would like to hear discussed, and join us next time on Your Health Habit.